Look, I get it. I know it's only June 2023, but I'm ready to go on the record right now and say it. Penn State's going to make USC the White Out game in 2024.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show, and my prayers have been answered. He's back quickly on the show, returning as a guest, and that is Jason Lord. Jason, see, I thought of one on the fly. I said I didn't have one, fly. And I thought of one on the fly. So it's great to have you back. Really, my prayers have been answered because I always enjoy getting your perspective.
Always great being on here, Zach. Thanks for having me.
And of course, today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started today. Jason, we have plenty because I want to get your perspective on the Big Ten schedule. 2024, 2025 have been released, and I enjoyed it a lot. I'm so glad that Adam Breneman was able to get to sit down with Drew Allar because that was a fun podcast to watch. Now, we're not going to go through the whole 90 minutes of it, but there were some things that Drew had to answer for that I think are just good topics for Penn State fans and Penn State media to discuss. So that's going to be in our final segment about Drew Allar. And now it's on him. The pressure's on his shoulders. Or is it? Well, we'll figure that out in segment number 3. Jason, the Big Ten schedule's out. I've talked quite a bit about it. I have 3 other episodes devoted to it. I encourage people to go check that out. But Jason, your takeaways ultimately from the Big Ten schedule, whether it's that Penn State's still unrivaled or Penn State is going to play Ohio State, Michigan. They're going to alternate. They don't have to play some of the toughest schools. Frankly, it's USC, UCLA, Ohio State, and Michigan, not in that order. But those 4, if you play all 4 of them in a given season and then sprinkle maybe Iowa in there, that's a pretty major gauntlet that you have to go through. But when you looked at the Big Ten schedules for 24 and 25, what ultimately came to your mind?
Overall, I wasn't surprised. They protected the rivalry games, which I figured was going to be the case. Some teams protected more than others. Iowa protected 3. Penn State is the one that didn't protect any.
None.
I wasn't surprised, though, by any of that. I wasn't really surprised by the fact that you were going to have big teams off your schedule because you have to cycle it through. You're going to play every 4 years. USC is going to make the trip here. Penn State's going to make the trip there. So you have to cycle all of that through in 4 years. So I wasn't overly shocked that you were going to have big games that weren't going to happen. You also don't want those teams canceling each other out every year. And I think that probably was going to happen if you were going to have these teams playing each other consistently. And I just don't think the current model was really feasible in terms of keeping all of those games every year. The Big Ten loves to use that cliche competitive balance. They always love using that term. I think they did a pretty good job overall of the schedule, and I thought it was fair. I think you looking at Penn State's, it's very good for a home schedule one year. The following year, not so much. The road schedule gets tough. So I think for the most part, if you look at everybody's schedule in the Big Ten, it was that way. Now, we don't know the actual dates, so who knows how fair it's going to be if Penn State's going to open on the road for the 1 millionth time in a row, or if they're actually get a home Big Ten games. But I think overall, when you look at opponents, not surprised by it. Not really. I thought overall, pretty good job. The old competitive balance, so to speak, is there.
Yeah, I think I want to go on record now, Jason, now that you brought the Big Ten home opener up. It's always the second or third game in the conference slate. And people will go back and say, well, they played Rutgers in 2015 or whatever. They weren't an official member of the Big Ten at that point, whichever season. It was somewhere baked in there, 2013 through 2015. I forget the actual year. But they played Rutgers at home, and that was their first game. They weren't actually in the Big Ten that year. So, yeah, Penn State for the last 14 years has only opened up at home to start the Big Ten slate once.
One time.
One out of 14 years. So hopefully that changes in due time. With that being said, on the record for 2020, I know this is June 2023, but I can confidently say this right now because Penn State gets to host. They don't have to go to USC the first year. That's important. They don't have to go to UCLA. They don't have to go to California, period. That is a major win for Penn State, but they get to host USC. That's perfect setup for the whiteout. Now, I jokingly said that Penn State shouldn't waste the whiteout on USC, that they should save it for Ohio State, and that they should try to schedule USC for a mid-November game. Because USC is going to fold. They're going to crack easily in that cold weather, right? That's not going to be fun for them coming to Penn State with potentially, I don't know if we're saying snow, but imagine upper 30s, maybe low 40s, and a bunch of rain. That's not going to be fun for them. So, but that all joking aside, I can confidently say two things. Penn State and USC is going to be the whiteout game in 2024. And Penn State is going to open Big Ten play at home against USC for that whiteout game. So you can check all of those boxes. Now, it's just a matter of sorting it out through the networks, but I have a good feeling that when the draft comes around, when they redraft for next year's games, Ohio State, Michigan will be the first pick by Fox. And then when it gets to NBC or CBS, because now we know they have night games, they can make an 8 p.m. game. But the idea was to have them do noon, CBS, Fox at noon, CBS at 3:30, and NBC at 7:30. Penn State is going to host USC in prime time, opening up Big Ten play in week 3 or 4. And then that checks every single box. It's earlier in the season. It's nice weather so that you don't hurt USC, right? You give them a fair advantage by having to travel all the way to Pennsylvania. And Penn State now, Pat Kraft, he said it was his mission to get Penn State some more respect inside of the conference. So I think the Big Ten is going to make an extreme effort here. Penn State, USC, it's going to be the whiteout in 2024. It's also going to be the first Big Ten game for Penn State, which is going to be, as we know, a home opener in the Big Ten slate because we know that they're hosting the Trojans. We don't just know that they're playing them. We know that they're playing them in Beaver Stadium.
Yeah, I think, first of all, looking at how the TV things work, CBS, I'm not sure next year. Reason that they have the night games this year, they're allowed to pick and choose a little bit more because of the SEC. Absolutely. So next year, I think you're probably going to be more locked into that 3:30 slot. But your second point, I think, is valid. At least to me, I'm pretty certain that they will probably have USC in the whiteout next year in some capacity. Whether it is opening the Big Ten or whether it is, somewhere in October, I do think that you're going to have USC as the whiteout game in all likelihood because you start looking at how, Fox picks the games. Obviously, they're going to pick what's best for their network. That's always the case. But I have a good feeling, and rightfully so, but I have a good feeling that they're not ever going to duplicate what they did a couple of years ago in the Big Ten. But they didn't do it in the Big Ten at that time. It was the Pac-12. But where they took that Arizona State and USC game, it was a big noon and it was a 9 a.m. kick. When Penn State goes out there in 2025, Fox
it'll be a night. It'll be a night game.
No, yeah, well, it probably could be a night game, but I don't think you're going to have a 9 a.m. kick anymore. I think. That as much as the network would love to do that, because look, Fox is going to pick what's best for Fox. It doesn't matter what time these teams are playing, but I think for that reason, you're probably going to see Penn State and USC as a night game next year, and probably as a whiteout. I would think it's going to be hard for me to say otherwise right now as I'm looking at it. Who knows come next year, this time what we're looking at, but. Yeah, I think some fans would love to have USC come here in November in 10-degree weather and see how they play. Absolutely right. Good point. But to me, I think the whiteout would draw more interest and more atmosphere in terms of USC being here for the first time. That would be a kind of a welcome to Happy Valley moment for sure. And then the following year, Penn State goes out there for the first time since 1991. So I like USC as the opponent first here, where you get the chance to play them. And then, look, the UCLA in 2025, too. So right away, the two California teams, Penn State was going to have their chance with. The one thing that I think is a little overrated at times, I agree with the weather. I think that's a factor. Yeah. I think the time change is another factor. How do you adjust to that, whether it's Penn State at home, USC coming here, Penn State going there. I
Yep.
don't agree with the long travel. It's not as long as people think it is sometimes. Look, you take a bus to Maryland or to Rutgers, and I give Steve Jones credit for this, made this point, and it's a perfect point. It's 3-4 hours. You take a flight to California, same thing, 4 hours, 4.5. So I don't agree that necessarily the travel from that perspective is going to be much different.
Yeah.
But I do think the weather is going to be an adjustment for them, and I think like the time zone change. There's reasons why in the NFL that teams are now on the East Coast for a full week or on the West Coast for a full week. Your body has to adjust to that. Now, as a college student, you may adjust better than a 39-year-old, but it's still difficult. And so I think those are going to be factors. All of that being said, back to your main point, though, Zach, I think you're right. I think it'll be the whiteout. Not sure it'll be the opener. I don't know if I go that far just yet, but it will be the whiteout, I think, in all likelihood, as I'm looking at it right now.
It is Locked On Nittany Lions. Penn State's outlook in the Big Ten is coming up in just a moment. But first, let's hear from our sponsor of today's show, and that is FanDuel. Make a fast break over to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs as they are wrapping up, because right now new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's right. I didn't stutter. $1,000. That's $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. There's no better place to bet all of the playoff action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. And once again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. If you like what we do here, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, comment any feedback, like the show, share it with friends and family, and of course, follow along wherever you get your podcasts as well. Appreciate all the support here. Jason Lord giving us some support on today's episode as we continue to just project what Penn State's going to do now in the Big Ten. That's 9 games. We know a bulk of their schedule here because everything's pieced together. They're going to have the home and away with West Virginia in 2024 as well. We just don't know exactly the order of these games, of course, but I can't help but think that the Big Ten, they're not going to put USC in late October, early November in a night setting for Penn State. That's going to be a late September game, and Penn State is going to make that the whiteout game. Unless it is late. If they actually do that, put it late in November, then you can scrap the whiteout and it'll be Ohio State. But season ticket holders got to love that 2024 schedule, and not the 2025 version of it, because there's 4 home games, at least in the Big Ten, right? Penn State's going to supplement those with 3 more non-conference games. But that's not a slate that it can't compare to 2024. But in general, Jason, what is the outlook for Penn State now over 2023, 2024, and 2025? How do you expect them to do in the Big Ten as a whole?
I'm not sure it's much different than it is right now. I think the expectations for 2023 as they stand are going to be the same next year. If they are able to succeed this year as we think they can, then the expectation in 2024 is going to be the same thing no matter what your schedule is. Now, does it help that next year you're going to have Ohio State and USC as your biggest games, and they're both at home? Yes. Now, that trip to Madison will be tough, sure, but you're going to have your 2 biggest games at home. Does that help? Absolutely, that helps. But I think from a full perspective, the expectation isn't going to really change. You lose the divisions, so maybe from a coaching standpoint, where you maybe finished second in the Big Ten West, and now you're finishing, 5th or 6th or maybe 7th in the Big Ten, then you might be a little bit more in the hot seat if you're a coach, especially in the Big Ten West, where I felt like it was weaker than the East for many years.
You could go 8-4.
Different.
We almost had a 7-5 team make it into the Big Ten championship this year.
Right. And that's a big difference. That's going to be the big difference, I think, with not having divisions. But just looking at Penn State's outlook, I don't think it's going to be a lot different at all. I think when you look at right now, expectation is 2023 is going to be a big year. Next year, you're going to likely have a season starter at quarterback. So I think the expectation is going to be very big next year. and then 2025 it stays. I don't think there's anything different just because of who you're playing and where they are in the schedule, and the fact that you don't play Ohio State or you don't play Michigan in 2024 and don't play Ohio State in 2025. Does it hurt your schedule a little bit? Yeah, sure, if it's needed, but I don't think from an outlook perspective it's going to change a lot of what you expect out of the team.
There might be a different identity in 2025 because I feel at some point it's going to
very possible.
There's obviously factors we can't predict, we can't project, we can only speculate.
Or who leaves, stays, and goes.
Is Mike Yurcich going to be around? Is obviously Manny Diaz going to be around? Is Anthony Poindexter going to be around? He almost took that head coaching job at UVA, right? We know that Terry Smith will still be here. He's forever Penn State, right?
Terry Smith was on the Penn State team that made the last trip out to USC there in 1991.
Yeah, he was. But those three guys, I think, can not necessarily make or break future Penn State teams, right? We've seen how many coaches come and go out of Penn State for good reasons, right? James Franklin has created such a dynamic coaching tree. He is consistently cranking out future head coaches, and the list is only going to get longer. So there, again, before Mike Yurcich, it was Kirk Shiraka doesn't count. But before Shiraka, it was Ricky Ronnie, right? And he's now the head coach at Old Dominion. Joe Moorhead became the head coach at Mississippi State, took the offensive coordinator job at Oregon. Now he's back at Akron, and now he's at Akron back as a head coach. So defensive coordinator, right? Brent Pry, for the longest time, was a loyalist to James Franklin. Now he's a head coach. So don't worry if those guys do cycle out, but that definitely changes things, right? Penn State, what happened when Joe Moorhead and Brent Pry came back in their second seasons? Penn State made the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and what makes a great head coach is his pedigree in the coaching tree that he has. I think there's no doubt about that. We've seen that really in all levels of football. Heck, you look at the 49ers with Bill Walsh's coaching tree. My goodness, there's Hall of Fame coach after Hall of Fame coach after Hall of Fame coach. And the same goes for college football. The assistants that have moved on from James Franklin, the assistants that have moved on from Nick Saban have won national championships, obviously, now. So I think what makes a great coach is not necessarily the ability to keep your assistants on staff. It's part that, but the other part of it is how successful those assistants are when they move somewhere else. I think that's a major stepping stone, too. And we've seen that in college football.
I do mean to I want to make a correction. I'm glad I looked this up. 2017 was the year, and that team, if it wasn't for a difference of 4 points, Penn State might have been 12-0. So I'm trying to, my point ultimately is that what does that have in common with this current team? Joe Moorhead and Brent Pry were back as their second season as both coordinators.
Right.
They weren't one of them wasn't cycling out, and James Franklin pointed that out as well. This isn't Manny Diaz's first season. This isn't Mike Yurcich's first season. They have consistency at coordinator with the right group of players, with a quarterback that can go to the moon with all of his potential. This team has a really good outlook. I would say for 2025, that identity is probably going to change because
it's going to be different.
We might see Mike Yurcich leave. We might see Manny Diaz leave. We hope that Drew Allar leaves, not because I don't want him to quarterback Penn State, but then that means
not just Allar, other players too.
That means something went wrong if he's still here. Okay. If he's here in 2025, that's just the unfortunate. You want him start this year, next year, leave for the NFL. And you want Yurcich and Manny Diaz around, of course, but you also got to imagine Singleton is going to go to the NFL. Katron Allen, they are the closest version right now of Reggie Bush and Lendell White in this current time. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, that dynamic duo.
With the ability they are as a duo, you have speed and you have power, and you have the ability to get short yards, you have ability to hit the home run. Yes, I would agree. Are they the best duo in college football? I don't know about that. I think they're close. I think it's very close. It's a toss-up.
They have the most potential. Blake Corum's coming back for another year, and of course we know how good Donovan Edwards is. I hate saying that.
Corum both, absolutely. But they have Ohio State too.
They're sophomores. They're sophomores, and they're in the national conversation.
Yeah, no, and the comparison I think you made is a good one because Reggie Bush was the guy that could hit that home run. Singleton's the same way. Gets outside, he hits that home run. And Allen's that guy that's going to get you that yard when he needs to, too. Now, granted, he's a guy who can make a big play, too. But he's also that powerful guy that can get you that yard, just like Lendell White was where at USC. Difference is, my hope would be if it's the national championship on 4th and 1, James Franklin would have Nicholas Singleton on the field, as opposed to Pete Carroll not having Reggie Bush on the field on 4th and 1 in the biggest game of his career. But I do see the comparison. I think that's a good comparison.
Yeah, and that isn't the first time that wasn't the last time that Pete Carroll made bad decisions at the goal line in the biggest game.
No, I think there was a Super Bowl in there somewhere where he had the best running back in football at that time, and he didn't give it to him.
Best power back anyway, best goal line back. But
in his prime, he was unbelievable.
It's a Penn State, but I think it is in terms of the Thunder Lightning, Reggie Bush, Lendell White, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen.
Yeah.
HappyValleyInsider.com is your place to go, and Penn State Rivals has made this show, Locked On Nittany Lions, your go-to podcast. So visit HappyValleyInsider.com for all the latest when it comes to Penn State athletics. Of course, recruiting is heating up. Big Ten schedules just come out. There was a lot of Penn State news that just flooded the market as the weekend has gone along. But Jason, in this final segment, I want to talk about Drew Allar now specifically. So we've highlighted him, said that he's supposed to be the starter for the next 2 seasons. He recently did a podcast with former Penn State tight end Adam Breneman. I wish Adam could have stayed his whole career at Penn State. He did graduate from there.
Phenomenal player in high school.
Exactly. Out of the state of Pennsylvania. He chose Bill O'Brien and the Nittany Lions. I'm so glad he's close with this Penn State regime, that the loyalty is there through thick and thin. And it's clearly paid off for him, because he gets access to interview Drew Allar for 90 minutes. It's like, that must be nice. So we can spectate, we can watch, and it was a lot of fun to see that interview. I encourage Penn State fans to go check it out. One former Penn State player talking to the present, right? This in particular, I thought there's so much content, right? I'm not here to analyze the whole episode. Everyone else is more than welcome to go watch it for themselves. But I thought this was an important. Adam asks all the right questions. He asks the best questions possible to whoever his given interviewee is. And one of them was, you're now the Penn State quarterback. You are going to be judged on whether or not you can bring a national championship back to Happy Valley. Is that the bar that is truly set for this 19-year-old kid?
Yes. Yeah, I think it is. You go back, and any 5-star recruit at the quarterback position that has come here and to Happy Valley has had that expectation. You go back to even as far to Anthony Morelli, same thing. Now, did he live up to the expectation? Now, he struggled at times, but absolutely. I think when you have that kind of expectation and talent coming there, the bar is set to win a national title. Now, right now, short-term goal is get by Ohio State and Michigan, which you've not been able to do. But the other part of it is to win the Big Ten East, ultimately win the Big Ten, and yes, win a national title. I think that's a fair way to put it, the way Adam Breneman said it. I think you are measured by being a national championship quarterback, and part of that is because, now granted it's been, 1986, the last one that Penn State won. You have won national championships here, though.
Yeah.
Todd Blackledge is measured by the fact that he was the quarterback in 1982. John Schaefer's measured by the fact that he was the quarterback in 1986.
Kerry Collins. Yeah.
Collins in 94 should have won a national title. Would have crushed Nebraska, in my opinion, when it comes to best offense I've ever seen play college football. But for me, I think when you look at it, there's no question. That is the measurement when you are a 5-star quarterback coming to a major program, that you're going to win a national title. And look, that's not just Penn State. Notre Dame has had quite a few over the years that have had the expectation that they were going to turn the Golden Dome around and give Notre Dame more national championships, and they didn't do that. Jimmy Clausen, Ron Paulus, I could go on for 2 hours.
By all
telling
means,
you quarterbacks
do it. I'm
Notre
here
Dame
for all the Notre Dame slander.
for Notre Dame guys that didn't pan out. Those are the 2 biggest ones that come to mind. Paulus obviously from Pennsylvania, and but that's the you are measured by that, and how you handle the pressure, I think, is something that is what defines you. I think that's what turns a good quarterback into a great quarterback. The recruiting tapes are always going to show your best plays. They're not going to show how you react after you throw that
from
pick
adversity.
Six.
Yep.
Yeah. That I think is where you start to measure the character and what you are as a quarterback. But overall, that measurement is the expectation. And the expectation is for you to succeed. And the biggest level of succession in college football as a team is to win a national championship.
So let me just a hypothetical scenario. We can go through so many, right? We know that Drew Allar isn't going to quote unquote. He won't be remembered the right way if they go 9-3, if they go 10-2. So what happens if he gets to because I can confidently sit here and say that Penn State is going to make the college football playoff in 2024. Okay. But that's going to be out of 12 teams. So does it mean as much, right? Because now it's 12 instead of 4.
Yeah.
So let's say that Penn State basically has 2 first-round exits in both college football playoffs. Penn State makes the top 4 in 2023, but they lose in the semifinal. And then they make the field of 12 and they lose in the first round. How do you determine Drew Allar's success from there?
I think it's gonna vary in that part, Zach.
Because he made the college football playoff.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That's a win for me.
I'm looking at for 2023. It's a win in a big way.
Yeah,
you're one of the top 4 teams in college football, and let's say Georgia three-peats. Georgia beats you. Georgia goes on to win the national title. I think you measure it as success.
That's a win.
No doubt about it. Next year is a little different, as you said. You're putting 12 teams in there. You're going to have home games for teams. So if you are one of the top 12 and you get bounced in the first round, I don't know if you measure that one as much. I think 2023, you get to the playoff as a top 4 team. I think that is a good measurement. You set the bar higher than what you had it previously, without question, if you're able to do that. Next year, I think it's a different animal because of the fact that there's a lot more teams, and it depends, again, on what happens. What's your overall record? Who did he beat to get there? Yeah. Jim Harbaugh's level of success right now is he beat Ohio State twice. He would not have that same kind of.
Penn State has done.
Yeah, exactly. He would not have had that had he not beaten Ohio State. So, does Drew Allar get by Ohio State and Michigan? Just like James Franklin, do they get by Ohio State and Michigan and route to that college football playoff? Then, if that answer is yes, I think the bar is higher. I think it's a successful season in 2023 for Drew Allar. Now, may one of those things not happen, and can it be a success? It could be, but I think that year is going to measure success. 2024, as you said, though, it's different. I think you got to be better than the top 12. You got to still be in the top 4 to 5 if you are in 2023.
But you made the college football play. It's just I'm highlighting the fact that the conversation's different. You can't just say anymore.
It's a lot different.
We made the college football playoff. You were the 10 seed, and the hypothetical 6 seed absolutely annihilated you in the first round. That doesn't qualify as something you should be. You can't hang a banner for that anymore. So if Penn State were to do that, basically sneak into the 12 team, they need to essentially make that semifinal. In both seasons. They need to make it in the top 4. So I'm glad you phrased it that way. Make the top 4 in both seasons. If Drew Allar and these teams are, and that's a shame, because I would like to sit here and say, like, oh, it's national championship or bust. Penn State needs to win a championship. But they've been so far removed from that, outside of winning the Big Ten title and winning the Rose Bowl. I know they just won the Rose Bowl this past season, but it came without a Big Ten championship. And the only reason they got to the Rose Bowl was because Michigan and Ohio State were in the college football playoffs. So it's just, unfortunately, that 2016 team, it currently is carrying the water for the rest of these James Franklin squads. And even back before, Joe Paterno wasn't exactly putting Penn State right there in the thick of the national championship conversation later on in his coaching career.
I was going to say later on in his career is a good way to put it, because he certainly was in the early 60s, 70s, 80s, even in the 90s. But
in the 2000s, since
05, he was in the conversation.
05, 08, until they lost to Iowa.
Absolutely lost to Iowa in a windy game in Iowa, yeah.
But it's been probably since 08, Penn State really hasn't been like that top team.
Not under Paterno towards the end. No, 2000. You go back to his final year. They were 8 or 9-1 when the unfortunate events that happened. But I think, to me, your point's valid though. I mean, Joe Paterno's success here, and to this, obviously, you can't measure everybody else's success against him, because Joe was just far superior. In so many ways. I never saw something more detail-oriented. 409 wins one school. It's never happening again. as long as I'm alive. I can confidently say that. But yeah, going back to the main point, you're right in terms of, let's say Penn State goes on and loses. Let's say they lose the national championship. Let's go that far. It's going to sting,
It's a success
yes,
because
but
Christian
it's going to
Hackenberg
be a
didn't do it
success.
and Anthony Morelli didn't do
Absolutely.
it as former
You know,
5
yeah,
stars.
yes. Let's look at it from another perspective. The Philadelphia Phillies, are they going to remember last year's team in the grand scheme of things? Sure, and they've won World Series. They've won 2 in 1980, 1 in 2008. They're going to remember last year, the memorable run to the World Series, even though they lost. Going to remember that 2009 National League Championship team, 1993 National League Championship team. You remember those over time because of the success they had. So yes, you will remember. If Penn State goes that far, you will remember this team as a success. There's no doubt about it.
I will say the difference here to just kind of wrap this up, how much pressure is exactly on Drew Allar. I think there is, because let's take a Christian Hackenberg, for example. He did not exactly have the supporting cast that, and of course the sanctions, right? The turmoil that was going on. Drew Allar, right? That it's difficult to compare those two situations, but Drew Allar has a solidified coaching staff, a running game, an offensive line, a defense where Christian Hackenberg basically had to do everything in his willpower to keep that offense on the field. Bill O'Brien had to get extremely creative in that one season with him as the quarterback. So I think Drew Allar, there's pressure in the standpoint of, yes, it's national championship or bust for a lot of Penn State fans, but you're not doing it all alone, is what I'm trying to say. So there's pressure in that regard, but not pressure in the sense of it's all on you, man. You have nobody else around you to help you. But there is pressure that you are the face of this national championship conversation when all said and done. It's not Nicholas Singleton.
Right.
It's not going to be, let me think of a few, Abdul Carter, right? No. It's not going to be on their shoulders. It is on him. So yeah, he's 19. He'll be 20, but I hope he carries that pressure very well, Jason.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I think it's more often than not, Zach, it's the quarterback, it's the coach that are going to have the most pressure in any situation. It's no different here. I agree with you. I think Allar is under the most pressure.
That'll do it for us here on another Locked On Nittany Lions. Jason, it's always great to talk to you. Appreciate you give the historical perspective of Penn State. That'll make a lot of Penn State fans feel good, right? Reliving the 70s, the 80s, the part of the 90s, right? And hopefully James Franklin and this group can duplicate.
Yeah.
I think even, like I said, a fraction of that success, because for me personally, if they lost the national championship game, I'd be able to sleep at night and say, well, I'm glad they made it. That's the point of it all.
Will. Yeah, you will when it's all said and done. Be extremely glad they make it. And you talk about the history. Can't believe it's going over dates earlier. It's 50 years that Penn State's only had its one Heisman Trophy winner already, John Cappelletti. It's incredible. I'd say let's get a Heisman to Happy Valley. You'd love to have it. Unfortunately, I think the Heisman Trophy has become more of a PR award than it's become a best player in college football award. But let's try to get one anyway, and silence critics there.
And if anyone's going to do it, honestly, on this team or the next team, it's not personally for me. It's not Drew Allar. It's Nicholas Singleton. And it's no disrespect to Allar.
Good, very well.
When Penn State teams that are really talented, and they're going to be ahead by a lot of points, Nicholas Singleton is going to be able to rack up those statistics because they'll be ahead by 4 touchdowns. You don't need to throw the football with Drew. You're going to run it with Singleton and Allen. So either one of those guys, I think have a better shot than Allar, just because Penn State won't be playing a lot of games where they're really close. They're going to beat a lot of opponents by a lot of points, except for the likes of Ohio State and Michigan. But time will tell. Jason, I always appreciate the time, the perspective, and can't wait to have you back on the show again very soon.
Anytime, Zach. Thanks for having me, as always.